Hello, fabulous friends, fans, and superstars. Welcome to the Jupiter special horoscope overview, looking at Jupiter moving through the sign of Scorpio from October 2017 right to November of 2018. I am your astrologer, Nadiya Shah. Thank you for being here. Jupiter moving through the sign of Scorpio is a big deal. This happens once every 13 years or so, and Jupiter likes to stay in a sign for a good long while of about 13 months or so. And that is the case right now. And wherever Jupiter goes, that energy, that area tends to expand. So we feel this in our own lives where we feel things just start to feel a little bit easier. They start to feel like there's more of a blessing energy in a particular area of life for a particular time. But collectively as well, we start to notice that what topics or what areas this sign represents starts to experience an expansion. Now, sometimes these expansions can be good, especially with our own attention, with our own intention to bring about the more healing side of Jupiter, because that is one way that Jupiter can be understood. But another way is just magnifying things, making things bigger, good or not, right? Because in some ways, yes, there's this positive, there's this negative in the universe. And at the same time, there are times when certain energies will just feel stronger. And it is up to us as individual people to decide what part of this energy we want to see manifest more, and to ensure with our intention to actually ensure that that manifests more and more. So that's going to be an important part of this energy, because we are going to have Jupiter while moving through this particular part of the sky, while moving through the sign of Scorpio, speaking with Pluto, which really is about, and this particular conversation is a harmonious one. It is a type of conversation that astrologers call a sextile. So it ultimately is asking us to dig in deep and be clear and honest with ourselves as we focus on what we want and see positive results as a result of our intention. But this particular time with Jupiter moving through the sign of Scorpio also means that Jupiter will also be dancing with the planet Neptune. And this is going to represent a lot of very dreamy energy, a lot of carried away energy, if I can say. So the sign of Scorpio covers many things. We'll go through a few of them one at a time. But one thing that comes to mind is this is an energy of the law of attraction, of really taking ownership for how it is that you are using your energy and your emotion, particularly the power of emotion, and what are you manifesting as a result. So there's one way to look at this, right? The law of attraction having to do with positive thoughts and how that creates your reality. Another way is to look at this, which ultimately is connected to Western occultism, comes to mind, right? So this has to do with how it is that we set an intention and align ourselves with our full emotion in a moment in order to affect ultimately some outcome that we are hoping for. So these two practices, whether you're looking at very traditional modes of occultism, whether you're looking at the law of attraction, they have a similar root to them. They have a similar philosophical underlining, which is that we can, with our intent, with our emotional power, with our thoughts, with our words, and if we want, right, some supporting external things as well. I'm thinking about, like, if you're doing a ritual, right? You may gather different correspondences that support that ritual. If you are someone using the law of attraction, you may gather things around you that remind you, like a vision board, for example, that reminds you what it is that you are trying and wanting and intending to manifest. Ultimately, these practices have their root in the same place, which is about focusing ourselves towards the future we wish to create, knowing with full confidence that we can show up for it, that it will show up for us. Now, this is a great way, I think, one way that we use our free will, which is a beautiful thing. But I do think when I look at this energy, a couple of things come to mind here. So one thing that comes to mind is that this whole idea, you know, the one thing that's really important to keep in mind when we do these practices, whether it's occultism, whether it's law of attraction, an important thing to keep in mind is self-knowledge, like the piece that self-knowledge plays and the piece that faith plays. So peace, there's one kind of peace that has to do with tranquility, right? In our spirit, in our soul. And there's another piece, like a piece of the puzzle, right? Which has to do with trusting ourselves, trusting our lives. If things aren't going exactly what we think they should be, that maybe there's some wisdom playing out there, and to trust that and to learn about ourselves in the process. So I look at this and I think, okay, I see this emphasis happening and coming up on taking ownership for our lives, for our energy, for our realities, and focusing ourselves on where we want to go and knowing that we can get there, which is a beautiful thing. And at the same time, I feel as I look at this, because I'm looking at that Neptune speaking with Jupiter, and I feel like it is going to be really important, and the active part of this will be to ensure that we are taking self-knowledge into account, that we are cultivating wisdom in the process as well. Because there are a couple of ways that this can manifest. So one way that this can manifest, of course, is more people reflecting on themselves and wanting to better themselves and wanting to create positive change. And that's a beautiful thing. That's ultimately a higher use of this energy. But another couple of ways that this energy could be used is really when it becomes like, it turns in on itself, when we start blaming people for their realities instead of having compassion. Compassion is the higher end of this vibration, and we should see collectively a lot of examples that allow us to bring forward our most compassionate, our most loving selves, especially because Neptune is involved. And we should see collectively as well people bringing forward examples of compassion that really do stir us to create meaningful changes in our own lives. And that's beautiful. But what we don't want to do is get into that place where we think, okay, you are responsible for yourself and what you've created, and that therefore I don't have to feel anything for you because you've done this. I think that that's where we want to get a little bit, we want to bring that self-knowledge in, right? Because that's a higher way to use this energy. But it is possible that the glamorization of those who were able to, you know, own their energy and go where they wanted to go, the examples of those can become a more dominant narrative rather than the compassion part of the narrative. So this energy will invite us to bring those two elements together, to find that place where we can recognize that we really can do just about anything. Like, that's one of the great, beautiful things about being a human being, is that we can do these incredible things that we set our heart and our soul on. And at the same time, it is the compassion of others that allows us to go there as well. So that's going to be part of the fine balance in one way as I look at this energy. Another thing is that Neptune is in the part of the sky and is a planet that speaks of healthcare. And I feel as I look at this that we are going to be having more conversations around that as well as a collective, especially in some parts of the world where that's not already a given. So we could see either an expansion or support of healthcare for more people. We could see that being a conversation more universally. The other thing, and the other way that I see this energy playing out, is having to do with addictions and how we treat addictions, how we understand addictions. And we should see some breakthroughs along those lines that help us to more fully understand and more properly treat people with addictions, coming up with Jupiter moving through the sign of Scorpio. Now, of course, the sign of Scorpio has to do with the taboo. And it has to do with, it's not so much, you know, when you look at the chart, right? When we look at astrology from a modern perspective, there is a shift in the way that we look at the chart in modern times. So in ancient times, like for example, those of you who are students of astrology may know that the 5th house is associated with love. And this is a very modern concept to think of matters having to do with, for example, the sign of Leo or the 5th house having to do with love. These traditionally were leisurely activities. These had to do with also your children and the things that you created. And so this shift is really reflecting how in much of the world we understand love, especially new love, in a very it's in a very one-sided kind of way. So it really wasn't until we got to the 7th house of partnership, because there was a time when the romance part, the enjoyment of love part, wasn't so much part of our collective consciousness. That's a very modern understanding of love. But there was a time when you got to the 7th house, right? You got to the sign of Libra, and it was about partnerships. And then you got to Scorpio, and it became about sharing resources and sharing even more deeply. But this understanding of looking at the sign of Scorpio as physical intimacy is also a very modern concept as well, because there's one thing that has to do with love and enjoying love and the physical expression of love. And there's something else that has to do with intimacy, like being deeply vulnerable with another person and sharing of secrets, sharing your vulnerabilities, sharing the things with another person that maybe you don't necessarily go around talking to everybody about. And having Jupiter move through this part of the sky could have us seeing many cultural examples of people really, if I may put this very bluntly, but really spilling their guts, really telling a lot of their secrets. And this emphasis on the telling of secrets may very well start to come at play as well at this time. I'm thinking about how when Pluto went through the sign of Scorpio, that was a period of time over several years. That was really the rise of the talk show and people coming on TV and talking about their childhoods and their deep buried secrets, and talking about abuse. This is something that culturally we just didn't talk about before. Sort of the dark side of intimacy is what, and the dark side of vulnerability, the dark side of trust, is what Pluto moving through Scorpio helped us to understand. Now with Jupiter moving through here, it is a healing energy, of course. And with Jupiter speaking with Neptune as well, there's going to be that emphasis on the healing factor, whether it's a soul healing, emotional healing. And speaking with Pluto as well, which is a planet that has been associated with things like psychoanalysis, things like digging deep within yourself, digging deep for buried treasure within your soul and within your life. I feel like culturally we'll see examples of people, in some cases that may surprise us a little bit, but of people really spilling their guts, for lack of a more elegant way of putting it, people really sharing very deeply their experiences of their early lives, of their childhood, and things that might have hurt them. And in this way, we'll get a lot of people, encouraging a lot of people to talk about these things a lot more. Now, as I said, this part of the sky, it has to do with the taboo and the physical part of intimacy as well. Again, to a certain extent, I did sort of preface that by talking a little bit about how we understand the chart in modern terms. But as I look at this, I feel like we may see some emphasis in our culture, in our world, some emphasis, some breaking of taboos, some exploration of what previously has been taboo as well, and some exploration about the dynamics and the power dynamics as well within relationships. So I'll talk about organizations and things in a moment, but when we look at within relationships and the types of agreements that relationships make, we're very quick to judge. I think with Jupiter moving through the sign of Libra, it was about, in some ways, expanding our understanding of what a one-on-one relationship is. But there are also other dynamics that play out within a relationship. Things aren't always, very cut and dry or very black and white. There tend to be different layers and different reasons that people will be in relationships or not. And I think that we will see some discussion of that on a collective level. We should also see more of a discussion of the benefits of things like psychotherapy and talking about the things that ordinarily, you wouldn't want to talk about, or we've conditioned ourselves not necessarily to talk about so freely, the value of going through a therapeutic process. So we should see some of that as well. But I see this, at least where it comes to the the intimacy part, we may very well see more people paying attention to what otherwise and what before has been more fringe practices where it comes to intimacy, where it comes to the expression of sexuality. Now, this could be for better or worse, right? So again, a lot of this is about our intention. And what I mean by that is that with Jupiter moving through the sign of Libra, there was a sense of expanding our understanding of one-on-one relationships, of normalizing different one-on-one relationships. Even conversations around gender as well can be part of Jupiter moving through the sign of Libra, especially because Jupiter was moving over the last year, was speaking with Uranus as well. So that also was helping us to expand our understanding of gender and of relationships and one-on-one relationships. Jupiter moving into the sign of Scorpio may end up taking the conversation to a more fringe place where we have to remind ourselves that some of the conversation that's happening is ultimately on a fringe level, isn't necessarily the regular experiences of a lot of people out there, especially when they are groups that are desiring to be normalized in some way. So we want to be mindful of that and to continue to be a little bit, to have that healthy perspective with that as well. Now, of course, we have to talk about with Scorpio power, and power, whether it is emotional power and the power that certain people may hold over society. I think about celebrities. I think about the power of a more primal power, like the power of sexuality. And we should see some cultural examples as well of people possibly coming up on the scene who really radiate a very strong magnetism and our understanding of what kind of power that is and why that may captivate us. I also think that this particular energy can have us, blurring the lines a little bit about what it takes to win and what's worth doing to win. And we'll continue to explore that as well with this. I, of course, want to talk about the money part of power as well, because the sign of Scorpio does rule financial power. So it's essentially the Taurus-Scorpio axis that speaks to financial institutions. But where it comes to things like big money, right, for lack of a more elegant way of putting it, but where it comes to like loans and grants and these very big financial institutions that deal in these matters with mortgages, we should see their powers or some regulations around them in different parts of the world. We may see some regulations relax a little bit. We may see some of that power expand a little bit. Again, I'm not passing any judgment here. It is, I understand, one of those topics that can be a little bit, a little touchy or a little controversial to some people. Not trying to even, go there. I'm just saying that this is part of how this energy can be realized as well, where we are considering, or collectively anyways, there may be a certain ease or expansion of some of these institutions in some parts of the world as well. How is it that institutions like big financial institutions, how is it that they can do the things that they desire to do? And, I look at this and I look at the fact that there's Neptune speaking. So there's this sense of this being a good thing, but not necessarily a lot of groundedness around this, right? So I'm not seeing restriction. I'm seeing a lot of conversation that leads to expansion around these particular types of groups. I also think about things like lobbyists and power. And again, regardless of how you see that or where it is, your opinions may or may not be on that issue. This looks like there may be some conversations around that, and some of those conversations may not necessarily be very public. There can be something very private about this, and at the same time, there can be growth in those institutions taking place. Now, I do want to just give you a little bit of a heads up, right? And of course, I'll be here to talk about it as we go along, but a lot of people are very interested in what's coming up in 2020. So in 2020, we are going to have what is being called the triple conjunction of Jupiter, of Saturn, and of Pluto. And when you think about the fact that right now Jupiter is going to be speaking with Pluto, and this is the last major aspect, if to speak in astrological terms, but what we call a Ptolemaic aspect. It's the last Ptolemaic aspect. So it's the last traditional major aspect that Jupiter is going to make to Pluto before meeting Pluto in the sky in 2020. We will start feeling this dance between Jupiter and Pluto before the year is out. And these planets are going to continue to dance. They'll reach their first exact moment in the month of January, but they'll have 3 exact moments over the course of 2018. And this is going to represent a very important time where we understand which way the wind is blowing, which way the conversation is going, that ultimately is going to help us to understand more about what is coming up in 2020. So it's going to be really important to pay attention to what is going on in the sky. January, April, and September are the power months of this extended conversation taking place between Jupiter and Pluto, because it's going to give us a little bit of a foreshadow to let us know how that triple conjunction, how is that ultimately going to speak to, going to benefit things like large organizations, structural organizations, and of course, financial organizations as well. Big business, big money organizations. Are they going to benefit? Are they going to be remade in some way? This is where the conversation really starts. And the way that I'm seeing it, because of that involvement of Neptune, because of the conversation there with Pluto, it speaks to, and again, there's no judgment. I think I've said that 3 times already, right? This could bring about an expansion of power among those institutions at this time. Now, of course, everything is not, all in one. It's not just any one thing. All else being equal, we have to keep that in mind, because what is going to start happening in 2018, of course, is that Uranus is going to move into the sign of Taurus for a good long stay. I'll be here to talk about it as we go along and as we get there. But this particular move of Uranus moving through the sign of Taurus is going to really remake and redefine what money is for us as a collective, what we do with money, how we use money. And so even though we have this move of Jupiter speaking with Pluto, even though we'll have Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto getting together in 2020, even though that's happening, at the same time, remember, it's all else being equal, right? And oftentimes there are several things going on in the sky that are ultimately in some way feeding each other and fueling each other. Now, Uranus and Jupiter are not going to ever get exact in their opposition while Jupiter is in the opposite sign of Uranus. However, this is going to represent an incredibly important move and change in the way that we understand and how we use money. So yes, things may be happening with financial institutions. Things may be happening with institutions that seem to handle a large sum of money and have a lot of power as well. And at the same time, a lot is being restored to the individual, and that is an energy that starts in 2018 as well. But that is for another video. We look at Jupiter moving through the sign of Scorpio, and we are set to be redefined in key ways where it comes to our boundaries, where it comes to what we allow ourselves to do, what we give permission to ourselves to do. And also where it comes to an understanding of power and power dynamics right where you are in your own relationships. The move of Jupiter through the sign of Scorpio is going to represent an exciting time where a lot of truths are going to be coming out. And of course, some of the most powerful truths that you will ever face are the ones about yourself. When you look at yourself more honestly, that is the surest pathway towards a life that feels truly authentic and truly your own. Well, thank you so much for watching. If you would like to see the Jupiter special for your sign, you can log on to astrofabulous.com or nadiyashah.com. Sign up to be my superstar, and superstars get instant access to the Jupiter special horoscope, so you can watch the video for your sign as much as you want in the coming 13 months. And of course, each and every week you get a brand new video, an extended extended, exclusive, expanded video looking at the week ahead. I really hope that you join me and that you love being a superstar and joining me in the superstar space. I'd love to meet you out there. It is astrofabulous.com or nadiyashah.com. Well, thank you so much for watching. It'll be a great transit, a great 13 months of Jupiter moving through the sign of Scorpio. It'll be a great transit. Enjoy.